Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up on a Saturday morning. A little unusual to say, but we have Formula E to recap, and with Formula E, that means we have Joshua Burch from Joshua Burch Motorsport and Edward Hunter from Formula E joining us today to discuss the show and the race. And a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers calling the show, Mark and Robin, for keeping us on the air. The newest member, David, highlighted in yellow. You too can have your name highlighted in yellow when you join our Patreon. Link in the video description so you can invest in the Grid Network, help us stay on the air, and get to the track more frequent. And gentlemen, what a tense and dramatic Hyderabad E-Prix. We saw a dramatic finish with Jean-Eric Vergne taking the win. He held off Nick Cassidy. Nick Cassidy had so much energy at the end. Jean-Eric Vergne, everybody anticipated was going to get overtaken, but he somehow was able to hold off Nick Cassidy and his teammate Sebastian Buemi, the two Vision teammates. What an amazing race. Everyone thought it was going to be Cassidy's race to lose. We heard the commentators, just wait to the last lap, wait to the last lap. Last lap, Jean-Eric Vergne, he pulled a Ryan Newman. He made that car wide and hard to pass. Edward, starting with you. How amazing was it to see Jean-Eric Vergne hold off both Envision cars behind him?
Well, I'm afraid the Ryan Newman reference is a bit before my time, so it's somewhat lost on me, Joe. But I'm assuming it's more of a Gilles Villeneuve hold everyone up behind you sort of performance on a sort of, I guess, inferior car as well, because the DS Penske is not really. It's not really got the one-lap pace, and it's not really got the efficiency. But nonetheless, Jean-Eric Vergne was able to get onto the front row of the grid in slightly controversial seconds. I'm sure Josh will take you through it since he watched qualifying live. I've decided to sleep through it and wake up for the race. But anyway, it was a really great performance from Jean-Eric Vergne, where he was just able to, once Mitch Evans was in fact, it was dispensed over some really good attack mode strategy, really, where him and Nick Cassidy sort of went into a bit later than Evans and Buemi, who had started the race in sort of the same positions as them. And they were able to sort of overcut as a result. And once Vergne got to the front, really, he was always able to defend the inside into the hairpin, which, of course, is effectively turn 3 after the chicane that everyone was sort of breaking track limits and then getting penalized for. So it was a really tactical performance by Vergne, a really canny one. He kept everything sort of just under control. And Cassidy, despite having all that energy, and I wasn't listening to commentary because me and Josh were commentating it live. I was also saying, "Oh, Cassidy is surely going to come through now." And Jev surprised all of us, and it's his first win since, I believe, Rome season 7. Of course, he got very close to winning a few races last year, and in the end ended up being denied, even though he was part of the title fight for quite a while into that season. So great to see Jean-Eric Vergne back on top, which a lot of people thought they might not see this season with the pace of the DS Penske. But he really put in an amazing performance there. I think he really outdrove that car. And Nick Cassidy still gave it his level best, started a bit further back down the grid, of course, standing like 6th or 7th, I think, and was able to put in a really strong challenge and still walks away with 2nd place. But it's Vergne who really starts round 4, and he said round 3 there. I've obviously missed a few rounds in the best possible way.
Don't know whether they should go black and gold with a leather jacket as well. It was a really fantastic.
That does look like
race.
A very Jev jacket, to be fair.
It is, isn't it? It is. It's all like a biker's jacket, but it is a Jev jacket. I've seen him wear something similar as well, but I've got so many coats up in the commentary box. It was that type of evening. But yeah, honestly, what a fantastic race. I think, Ed, we were commentating, weren't we, with Nick Homewood, and on the last couple of corners, energy management became a factor for Vergne because...
Yeah, you were just reading out numbers. I was just said it. Yeah. It's 0.3, 0.2, and then he's regened a bit. Now it's 0.2 again. And now he's crossed the line.
It was literally all it was, because that's all we had to go on, because there was no logical position to make a move going into the last couple of corners. And Cassidy had double the amount of energy as well. He had 4% left at the end of the race, whereas Vergne was still struggling to make it across the line with the usable energy. So we only had one added lap as well. So where that went throughout the race, we don't know. It was fantastic. I made the reference as well in the commentary that I didn't know where the more bad driving was. It was on the motorways of India, on the road, on the Hyderabad street circuit as well, because there was certainly more carbon fiber on the racing track as well. But I think both divisions did incredibly well today. I nearly got my pick a winner, but then Buemi lost it with power overuse and got thrown down to 15th place. Cassidy surprised us all. He was on a real charge. I think he's going to win another race this season. And Jean-Eric Verne, as you both say, really did do a Ryan Newman, Gilles Villeneuve as well. Made it as wide as possible. Couldn't get through and took a thoroughly brilliant win. The only thing, though, you were saying about qualifying, it really was bizarre. Joe, stop me if you're going to get into it later about qualifying. But it was really weird because we had a situation in the group stages where in the quarterfinals, we had Buemi versus Fenestras. Buemi won that. That was fine. Gunther versus Evans. Evans won that. That was fine. So that put in the semi-final 1, Buemi versus Evans. That locked it out. Quarterfinal 3 saw Bird versus Verne. Now, Bird won that, but then had his lap time deleted for track limits at turn 2. So that promoted Verne automatically into semi-final 2. And then the quarterfinal 4 saw what was then Mortara versus Rast. Mortara won that duel, had his lap time deleted. So Rast then won it and then had his lap time deleted, which means that basically quarterfinal 4 never happened. And I thought, well, what they're going to do here then? Are they going to redo the session? Are they going to put 3 cars out in the final? Are we going to have a situation where it's literally best lap time wins it? We were standing around for about 10 to 15 minutes trying to work out what the grid was going to be. Eventually, they released they released Buemi and Evans. Evans won that, and then Verne was literally racing himself. They literally, it was phantom. So I was making the puns on the commentary saying, well, I think Verne just got this. He's 2 tenths up in the sector, but he's facing last name who had experience in Formula One. So it was a really weird situation where Verne, all he had to do was do 1 lap in the semi-final 2 at any speed. He could have gone on for 15 minutes, could have gone on for 1 minute 15 as well, which he did. But he was automatically into the final, no matter what he did. And then in the final, he got beat by Evans anyway. And it was just such a bizarre...
He got only narrowly beaten by Evans, though. It was very, very close between the two. But you and me are no strangers having to inject tension and jeopardy when there is none, Josh, into a commentary. So I'm sure that came naturally to you. But remember last season in Berlin when Alexander Sims and it was Verne again, actually, were in a duel where they set identical times to 100ths of a second, I think. I forget what the actual time was, but Sims ended up winning the duel because he was sent out first, essentially, in the order, and Jeb were behind him. So it feels like another very similar one, except Jeb was on the receiving end of the sort of good luck here on this occasion. So this obviously is a slightly more comical one because it's slightly, like you say, Jeb racing against himself, but I feel like it's more of a consequence of that turn 1 and 2 chicane. And we saw it in the race too. Lots of people cutting it almost every other lap. And eventually the warnings building up too much for like Stoffel Van Dorn, for instance, lost a points finish today because he cut that chicane a few too many times.
Well,
and it's a consequence of them not including the curbs because they were complaining about it before the race. And unfortunately, because it was such a rush job to put the track together in Hyderabad, they didn't have time to really put the proper curbs on to attach them properly. So they sort of just left it kind of blank and painted a few lines on. And ironically, they end up just sort of drifting over them constantly because it's the most high speed corner in the track. When they did Indian Racing League, which is of course a different championship, that was just a flat out right hander, obviously with a combustion engine. So almost like these quasi prototype cars. They look a little bit like the Gen 2s, the Indian Racing League car. And he said IRL, but that's more Indie Racing League, not the Indian Racing League, to be confused with. But anyway, it was just an interesting kind of thing where obviously the tracks was sort of commissioned for Formula E, but wasn't quite designed for it. It sort of feels like they're having to adapt it from the Indian Racing League layout for Formula E in that sense. Just for that specific corner, the rest of the layout was almost identical, I think, besides 1 or 2 little curbing changes.
Yeah, and as you say, 18 drivers got track limits warnings during that race. 18 of the 22, just like to point out. And car 7, 8, 27, 11, 1, all got 5-second penalties. So trying to do quick mental math, that would be, or car 7, that's Max Gunther. Car 8 is Oliver Rowland. Car 27 is Jake Dennis. Car 11 is Lucas de Grassi. Car 1, Stoffel van Dorn. And car 16 is Sebastian Buemi. So they all got 5-second time penalties added to their time. Buemi actually got a drive-through penalty for the overpower. So that was 17 seconds added to his time, dropped him from 3rd all the way down to 15th as well. But I'll tell you what, Joe, throwing it back to you to get back on the script as well. The final classification is subject to appeal. So we still don't know what's going to happen. Right now, they're final, but they've lodged appeals because of the powers and the track limits and all sorts. Basically, we're in a situation where a couple of years ago in Santiago, we had a similar situation with track limits. I mean, it's happening again, whereas they're just filing through the protests. And I think we won't find out until Friday of South Africa exactly what the final result is from here.
And that's the thing. We know there's a protest. Yeah, the results are final, but with these protests, they could change. And of course, we'll be reporting them if they change right here on the Grid Network. A couple of comments in the chat room. Dimas, one of our regulars, thank you for tuning in. Crazy, John Eric Verne comeback. As you said, it's been a while since he last got his win, quite some time ago. Rod Brown, wish we could get SVG into IndyCar. Another Scott McLaughlin for sure. Very talented. Must have been watching our pre-race countdown of the grid ranking champions. Shane Van Gisbergen, one of the hardest to beat. And of course, Dimas. Formula E hybrid in India is done. Next stop, MotoGP in India for motorsports around the world. Then he has a question. When is the Cape Town E-Prix and the Sao Paulo E-Prix? Both of those are coming up, with Cape Town coming next, February 25th, and March 25th, Sao Paulo for the Sao Paulo E-Prix. So definitely thank you to everyone for tuning in with your questions. And of course, we encourage everyone to comment in the chat room with their opinions as well and questions for us to share on the air. One of the big things, the celebration for Envision, as you mentioned, Joshua, it was very short-lived because Sebastian Buemi, with that overpower, he went from 3rd, making a Envision 2-3, all the way down to 15th. The only person behind him was Jake Dennis, who had a long time in the pit stops due to an accident between him and Rene Rast. So he essentially went from the 3rd car to the last car running, besides Jake Dennis, who had his issues. And of course, this promoted Antonio Felix da Costa to the podium and points leader Pascal Wehrlein to 4th place. Starting with you, Joshua. How did Buemi use too much power? And do you agree with this penalty?
It's a slam dunk in terms of if he's used that power, then if he's gone over the limit. It was 40 kilowatts plus an extra 1.5 for the first lap because its start line was miles away from the finish line. So they had to sort of adjust it. Usually where the start line and finish line is offset, the start line is 2 turns before the finish line. Here, it was the opposite way around. The finish line was 2 corners before the start line. So they had to do an extra lap, and that used up the 1.5 additional kilowatts of energy usable. And then we had the situation where we had the safety car that was out. So they had an extra lap to have to use it up as well. And also we were hearing throughout the race the fact that Buemi was constantly overusing energy. He was having to save a lot more. Verne was doing the same. Cassidy saved it perfectly. The 2 Jaguars were interesting as well. Evans was using more energy than Bird was as well. So it seemed like those running at the front were really having to push the cars harder in order to keep ahead. It was that type of circuit because it was flat out. So with Buemi, he's simply just gone over on the last lap by a fraction as well. And if it was an overpower on a spike of energy, so if it's gone over the 300 kilowatts allowed for the race, say it's gone to 301, 302, that spike of energy can also come from a bump in the road, simple things like that as well. Over acceleration, you've gone too far, the car's got faster, and it's registered as an extra power use. So there's 2 different methods of what it could be for overpower. Version 1 is that he's used too much. He's gone over the 40 kilowatts allowed in the race, and the battery's gone to negative numbers as well in terms of charge. And the second one is the fact that he's spiked somewhere on the battery power, on the accelerator blipping somewhere around the circuit, probably on a bump. We've seen that several times in the past.
Yeah, I think that's right, Josh. It's either what we saw with Dan Ticktum in Mexico, where I think Mark Preston instantly called it at the time. He said, "Right, that'll be a coding error in the software, so not the driver's fault at all." Or it's like you say, him going over a bump, and the power sort of spiking, which also is not the driver's fault at all. So but as much as you got to feel for Buemi, the fact that the rule has always been this way, that it's always been that you either have to serve a drive-through like we saw Ticktum do in Mexico, or you get this 30-second penalty post-race. And we saw the pictures of Buemi sort of forlornly sort of collapsing by the side of the circuit and sort of bemoaning, "Oh, why did this happen to me?" sort of thing. But you got to the rule has to sort of be consistent, and it's been this way for many, many years with the sort of overuse of power, essentially. And I think as much as it's a real tough pill to swallow for the Envision team, because getting a 2-3 is tough. The only thing that's tougher to do than that is a 1-2, of course. And I think it was a really good performance from both cars today, even with Buemi sort of maybe not quite stepping up to because he did qualify third and end up sort of being outfoxed on the strategy by Nick Cassidy. And like you say, Josh, struggling with energy management throughout the race. His engineer was constantly saying, "Look, we need to make sure we have some energy at the end so we don't get what happened to us in Saudi Arabia happen to us again," where of course Buemi got caught. Was it Buemi got caught at the line? I know it was Evans who got caught at the line, wasn't it? And
Evans got caught at the line, and because Rast was stopped in front of him, so he had to shove him across the line.
And Buemi was able to gain a position because of that. They were saying, "Oh, that might happen to us," I think was the seed that was trying to be planted there by Buemi's race engineer. I think what was the original question on this segment? Do I agree with the penalty?
Was it fair?
Yeah. Was it fair? On Buemi, no. But on the team, it's a sort of thing where I guess I get it. It's the sort of thing that can happen to anyone. Well, like I said, we already saw it happen to Neo through earlier when they were running in a similarly quite strong position in Mexico, Ticktum. But it's part of Formula E. It's part of the rules. That hopefully it seems to happen less and less, I think, is the good thing. Obviously, with a new car being introduced, it sort of means they're going to be pushing the limits on what they can get away with on software. So these things are going to happen now and again, and especially when you're pushing right again, trying to get the absolute most out of the battery at the end of the race, unless you're Nick Cassidy, of course, which you just save, get stuck behind Jev and then can't use it because Jev is like a immovable object, and Nick Cassidy almost irresistible force, but not quite there yet. Otherwise, he would have been able to resist Vern's defense, I guess, and found a way through. But sometimes you just come up against someone that you just can't pass, as Formula E sometimes at these street circuits. But yeah, I feel a bit for Buemi, but the other side of that, of course, is that puts Da Costa on the podium. I thought Da Costa we didn't see a whole lot of it on TV, but Da Costa had a very, very good drive today and actually outshone Pascal Wehrlein, because Da Costa said in his post-race interview that he basically got pushed out by Dennis at the start of the race and had to make up loads and loads of more places because he dropped from, I think, 13th, 14th to 15th or 16th on the first lap and then just clawed his way through the field. Admittedly, there was a lot of carnage that helped out on this occasion, but I think the flip side of, as much as we feel sorry for Buemi, it does elevate what was a really, really good performance by Antonio Felix da Costa, who I should have picked to win if I hadn't been so cowardly and gone for Evans instead.
As you mentioned, Antonio
Felix. I went for Buemi. We had a bad day.
Off day, yeah.
So, Antonio Felix da Costa started 13th, so quite a drive to come all the way up. As you mentioned, of course, with Formula E, we know this is the nature of Formula E. Contact. We had a safety car period, debris on the track, way it goes. One quick update from Casey Campbell. We encourage everyone to check out Casey Campbell's channel, Asian Le Mans Series 4-Hour Dubai. And we encourage everyone to check out Casey Campbell's channel and the Grid Endurance Performance Index, where all season long we'll be previewing, recapping, and scoring all the endurance car races, especially the hypercar class. Big thank you for Casey for providing these updates from the 4 Hours of Dubai. And of course, there'll be a recap Wednesday on Grid tonight, right here on the Grid Network. Now, going back to championships, and we got to talk about the championship standings here, especially behind the top two. They got shuffled around big time with today's race. We saw now, you look at it, assuming the standings the results doesn't change with these protests. You got John-Eric Verne in third place. He is still quite a ways back behind the top two. Wehrlein, despite the tough start to the weekend with that big crash, starting back towards the middle of the pack, came home in fourth place, took home 12 points today. That is huge considering Jake Dennis was up towards the front, but then was Rene Rast got into him, fell down to 16th place, no points. Right now, Pascal Wehrlein is 49 points ahead today's winner, John-Eric Verne. Edward, starting with you, do you believe Pascal Wehrlein and Jake Dennis are still the class of the field that everyone's trying to catch, or have they been caught by everybody already?
I don't know. I sort of feel like Pascal Wehrlein, I don't want to say lucked out because you can't just get away with being lucky in Formula E, even though I seem very much looking at the fortunes of McLaren today to put somewhat of a curse on the, as I keep calling them, the Nemo McLaren team after an FIA typo in one of their articles that they've since corrected, sadly. But although not for that particular company in question. But anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Pascal Wehrlein. So Pascal had that off in FP1, bit of a chaotic FP1 as well that got delayed due to
tell me about it.
Yeah, due to unfortunately the police of all organizations letting the general public onto the track. So clearly the police didn't get the memo that free practice was taking place on Friday, and the commuters were all trying to get to work through the circuit, which I guess would have been their normal route otherwise. And then once that all got clear, Pascal Wehrlein had this throttle issue, which meant that none of the Porsches could go out to the Porsche powertrain cars could go out to do any practice at all until that had been diagnosed. So they did come out for FP2. The issue had been fixed, whatever it was. We believe it was tied to the electronic control unit for the lights, essentially, that wasn't working. It sort of malfunctioned and the throttle stuck open at the final corner, I think it was, just before the start-finish timing beam. But yeah, that definitely put Wehrlein on the back foot, dented his confidence a bit. We saw him just miss out on getting into the duels, and similar for Jake Dennis as well. Wehrlein also got a penalty for impeding Sergio Sede Camara. 3-place grid penalties that put him behind Dennis on the at the start of the race, and sort of I think even behind, just ahead of his teammate at the very start of the race anyway, in Forma da Costa. And it felt like Wehrlein sort of was kind of surviving. It was a survival race for Pascal Wehrlein, and survive he did, whereas Jake Dennis wasn't quite so lucky. He unfortunately had a flying Nemo McLaren, a flying fish, a kingfisher, as it were, just attacking him in the form of Rene Rast and destroying his rear winglets, which was a shame because Jake Dennis was on for a pretty decent result up until that point, potentially onto the podium again. And as a result, he ended up having to go to the pits to sort of just get these flopping fins on the back of his car removed on that Andretti. But in terms of the championship, we're 4 races into a 14 race championship. So we still got 16, is it? 14 16 there. So we've got 12 races left, essentially. And I feel like this is a little bit of an anomalous result in the scheme of things, partly due to it being a new circuit that the teams and drivers didn't know too well going in, and also because of the extreme heat conditions playing a part and the dust offline making overtakes kind of hard to do. You sort of saw a few people getting it wrong, and we might get into one of them in a bit. But yeah, I feel like Dennis was having a very good drive up until he got taken out, and Pascal Wehrlein. Maybe not the most spectacular drive from Pascal Wehrlein today, but it's a sort of drive that ends up winning you championships at the end of the day, where you survive, you bank a load of big points. We've seen the Formula E championships won that way before by, funnily enough, the likes of John-Eric Verne in the past. I remember he had this sort of almost Alain Prost-like consistency where he just keeps scoring points, podiums consistently, even if he wasn't winning, and that would keep him in mathematical contention at the very, very least, if not in condition to sort of seal it a few races early. So I really think today was a good day for Pascal Wehrlein in the points, but in terms of the pace, I think Jake Dennis is going to start striking back. I don't quite see enough evidence that the likes of Buemi and Verne are really in it at the moment, unless Jaguar and DS put in some major improvements in terms of software over the next couple of races and become super efficient. Then I think things could get really interesting. But at the moment, I think the Porsche powertrains still have a bit of an advantage, at least at a typical Formula E circuit. Although, what is typical anymore in Formula E?
Nothing. I don't think anything is typical. I mean, we ended the broadcast by saying Formula E is back to normal with its crazy, wild street races. I think this weekend's just been off, as you said, Ed, for Porsche. It does feel like they've had the look at the draw for the first two races, and now that look's gone. Verline with that horrible accident in first practice. I said actually,
I know Porsche got pretty lucky in the race, third and fourth. Yeah,
they did, yeah. Yeah, but that was honestly by luck. Verline's crash in practice one, I said, was one of the worst accidents I've seen in a long time in Formula E because it was a slow corner and it was full throttle. And I think Nick Homewood put it, it was like when Rosenquist broke his leg in IndyCar a couple of years ago at Detroit by going up on the wall. It was that serious. The throttle sticking open, losing control of the rear and smashing into the wall. I was very surprised there wasn't any broken bones there for Pascal. He got very, very lucky. That offset his whole weekend. Porsche lost the entire first session for both the factories and the Andretti's, as well as they share the powertrain, because they couldn't work out what was going on. We now understand it's a software issue with the car that is also linked to the problems that with the battery and the problems with the lights as well as why they're not working. So it seems to be a generational car. Me, Ed and Nick went into it in length in our pre-race show, which many people think is scripted. It's not. We literally just go on air. I ask them how they are, and then we just get talking about something that's happened on the weekend. It's completely not scripted, our pre-shows as well. But it was nice to see that he bounced back after poor qualifying. All Porsches had poor qualifying, but we saw that back in Saudi Arabia and Mexico. So it's nice to see that he managed to get third and fourth. But Pascal Wehrlein, fourth, I think he's now 18 points ahead of Dennis in the title. And then there's something like 30 points back. There we are. Look, yeah, so look, 80 points for Wehrlein, Jean-Eric Verne and Sebastian Werning on 31 points. That's quick mental math not working. So that's what, 50 odd points, 49 points. Insane after 4 races. They've got that big of a gap. They are still the two at the front. And I think Pascal's starting to eke away a little bit. But as Ed said, 2 races coming up now again, which is on brand new circuits, more open fields. Nobody's got a clue what's going to happen. I think we'll see Dennis bounce back in South Africa. And then somebody else could turn up in Sao Paulo as well and take the race victory. And this is what happens when we have single header races now. We've done the double in Diriyah. That helped Wehrlein a lot. Now we're back into the normal swing of single header races. Every point matters, and you only get one day to shine. You don't get a redo on the next day.
Yeah, every point matters in these. The next doubleheader weekend will be Berlin, essentially April 22nd, 23rd. So you got these 2 races where every point's going to matter. Every session's going to matter, especially these new tracks. You missed a timeout because we were talking, well, probably you guys were talking about. I know the commentators were talking about. I wasn't on the air, but we didn't see the Porsches up towards the front like we anticipated in qualifying. And then in the race, Pascal Wehrlein, Jake Dennis, they worked their way towards the front, and Tony Felix Acosta looking good as well. So it seems like the Porsches are getting pretty much a force to be dealt with all year long. Now, one team I anticipate they were going to be a force to be dealt with today until they had a very unfortunate accident that essentially left a lot of folks speechless and shocked that it occurred. Mitch Evans, the pole sitter, was in control of the race, running up towards the front, but then entering turn 3, his teammate, Sam Bird, he comes in hot, and out of all the cars he hits, his teammate, Mitch Evans, while he was making that hairpin corner. Both cars came to a stop. They both went into the pits, and both were done, essentially eliminating a double points day, a potential double podium finish day for Team Jaguar. We saw team principal was not happy at all when the accident occurred. Right now, Sam Bird, 6th in the points, 52 points away from the points lead. His teammate Mitch Evans, 12th, 66 points away from the points lead. Jaguar, they are 5th overall in the team points behind McLaren in 4th, Envision and Reddy and Porsche, which is, of course, leading it. 12 rounds to go. Joshua, does Jaguar get nervous about their position in both point standings? And how did they handle the situation between Bird and Evans?
I think, first of all, I think Jaguar are getting slightly nervous because they had a poor start to the season in Mexico. Then they had a very good 2 races in Diriyah. Now they've had another low point here. But if you track back, both of them are caused by Sam Bird. I mean, he had a low in Mexico, had a high in Diriyah, and he's now had a low here, and he's brought the entire team down. So this does seem to be a catalyst of Sam Bird, who's had a yo-yo season so far, as good, bad, good, bad. So maybe South Africa is going to be good for him. But I do start to worry about Sam and the Jaguar relationship. It's got to be fracturing, surely. Poor start to the season, poor testing. Car gets good in Diriyah. And then Sam goes and takes out Mitch Evans, who started on pole and had a decent shot of winning the race today. I would be fuming. I would honestly be fuming. Ed, correct me, it's James Barkley, isn't it? Team principal Jaguar.
It is, yes.
Yeah. I would be fuming. Absolutely fuming. I would be having a word with Sam and saying, you've went for a move, that's fine, but your head's not in it. Your head is not in this race. You need to take a step back and look at what is going on and get yourself together, because Sam is at the catalyst of both good weekends, but the majority so far bad, and it's getting quite worrying now.
Don't think we can really blame Sam Bird for, what was it, the differential that failed in Mexico? that didn't feel like that had anything to do with Sam, other than that he just happened to be driving the car when it kept failing on him.
And I think it was his attitude with the team, though, as well. Do you remember he was quite negative towards them in Mexico as well? So it was,
as he would be on the radio immediately after that happened. But notice his attitude today after. And he didn't take out Mitch Evans deliberately. I think he was
it's not deliberate.
So entirely focused on making his move. And he made a very late traditional Sam Bird dive on Sasha Fenestraz that not only did he go past Fenestraz, that he was locking up and it was too late to stop because he got on the dirty stuff. There were a lot of leaves apparently on the track at turn one. Apparently Sam Bird just went to the inside. Was the first one to do it in a while and just went skidding offwards into the side that spun his teammate around and then trapped Fenestraz and also trapped Maximilian Gunfer, who was just the next man on the scene. So it was absolutely a calamitous thing that basically took 4 cars essentially out of the running for the major points. I think it was a bizarre situation because at the very start of the race, Mortara did something quite similar. Lost his front wing on the back of Nick Cassidy, dropped to the back of the field, replaced for a new front wing. And then in the end, there was a safety car later on for Hughes, who retired, and then Mortara was able to sneak a point at the end of the race, which is a sign of a truly bizarre and, like you say, traditional Formula E race. But Sam Bird's attitude after the accident, he immediately copped to it and said, "Look, I'm sorry, that was all my fault," essentially. And he's really angry at himself because he knew that he'd been so focused on Fenestraz to the left of him that he hadn't been focused on Evans ahead. And by the time he realized he was going to hit him, it was too late to do anything about it. So I feel a bit for Sam, but is that traditional Sam Bird? And it's been like that since the very start in Formula. He's capable of these amazing drives. You think that sequence in the first 7 seasons where he was able to win at least one race in every season, and often when the car wasn't the best, he was able to somehow get a good qualifying performance out of it and keep it in positions that it often didn't really deserve to be at Virgin and occasionally at Jaguar too. And then his form of late has been a bit up and down, but he sort of returned to it in Diriyah, had that great fight with Rene Rast that we all remember. Well, those that watched did. I didn't. And you have to say, this might dent his confidence a bit going forward, but it didn't sound like when they interviewed James Barkley mid-race, he didn't sound like a man that was about to chide or chastise Sam Bird too much. I think that's sort of part of the deal. With Sam Bird, you get box office. You either get amazing pole positions, amazing performance, and he felt he could have been on pole as well if he hadn't cut, because he did beat Verne in that duel. It could have well been an all Jaguar fight for pole position. They could well have controlled the race completely, but in the end, when they came together, it was just horrific luck, especially for Mitch Evans, who didn't do anything wrong. He was just wrong place, wrong time, like pretty much all the other drivers apart from Sam in that incident. So, I feel sorry for Mitch, but I also feel sorry for Fenestraz and Gunfer, who also looked on for good results today. And I feel sorry for Bird because he didn't mean to do it. This is one of those things.
Yeah.
But I feel like they'll forgive, they'll forget, they'll move on. And I think Sam Bird will win a race later on this season, and they'll say, right, that makes up for you costing us a 2-3 potentially in Hyderabad. Or they were 3rd and 4th, I think, at the time. So maybe depends if they would have been able to get past Fenestraz and Boemi or not, but we don't know. We will never know now.
One thing, just before I let you continue, in my notes in the commentary on attack mode information, I write down little things so I know what to say. I said outside turn 3 hairpin, which was Devil's Den. I put in brackets very dusty offline, and re-entry could cause crash. How right was I about?
I don't think
what
that's
happens?
Devil's Den. Devil's Den was the 90-degree left-hander,
Up
a bit
thing,
just
yeah.
after. Yeah, I think that was the Timbelli. I apologize. It was
the
the
something hairpin, yeah.
Timbilly.
Yeah,
Timboli?
it was something.
Something like
I
that.
got it,
My
yeah.
Indian names are awful.
Yeah, I got the wrong name on it, but the very dusty offline thing was spot on. The problem is I couldn't find the track names. I don't know where everybody's.
It was from the
Jack
IRL,
Giamana's
the
getting
Indian
from.
Racing
Oh, I
League
see.
layout on
Should have
Wikipedia.
texted.
I think.
Yeah, should have texted Jack about that and got the stuff from him.
Yeah, one of the things I seem to notice when it comes to Jaguar, it seems like off the gate each season, they seems to be a little bit on the slow side, and then they get faster and faster. Last year, especially Mitch Evans, not the greatest out of the start of the season, but then once he got the 2 wins in a row, he was on fire. Jaguar has a fast car. As you said, they both could have been front row lockout. It's just these mistakes, they do add up where if we come down to Mitch Evans or Sam Bird contending for a championship, we know the difference, how big or how small. It's going to come back to what happened here this race weekend. Just really interesting to see Jaguar again. They have a fast car. You just can't seem to seal the deal. And even with Mitch Evans, he lost positions when he went through the tax zone and then got overtaken, not once but twice, as other drivers took the tax zone, tack mode, and he was unable to get around him. So really tough break for Jaguar this weekend. They're probably looking forward to Cape Town. They know they got fast cars. Just focus on the race, and hopefully at Formula E, especially this weekend, if it's the same Formula E where we joke about the Wheel of Destiny, if they can put a consistent run, they seem to have a good shot at it. One team that's really looking forward for the next race weekend, McLaren. Jake Hughes, he crashed down, exiting that 90-degree corner, lost it, seemed from just the dust, the leaves. Very surprising move. And then Rene Rast getting into the back of Jake Dennis. Hughes, it was really interesting. He would look like he was going to be in the top 8 qualifying brackets, but then he had a penalty for only being in the pits for 95 seconds out of the 100 seconds. Ed, starting with you, why does this really exist? And was this really a welcome to reality for Jake Hughes in Formula E? Because he had such a great start for his rookie season. Now it's a torn up car and no points.
Well, I believe the rule is essentially a little bit to do with remember in Mexico we had this thing where Jake Dennis's front wing fell off, and Josh is nodding. He has no idea what I'm about to say. But,
I'm nodding along with you.
Where Jake Dennis's a bit of his front wing got damaged because he hit a bollard and he couldn't replace it. So yeah, I believe with Jake Hughes but it was sort of the minimum thing, but it's just sort of the idea that they're not allowed to rush the car back out. Usually we have seen teams fall foul where they've basically not been at the end of the pit lane in time. I remember it happened to Suchita back in their first season, in season 3 at Marrakesh. They didn't send John-Eric Verne out in time, so he didn't get to do his lap in Superpole and effectively lost the potential shot at pole position because of that. So poor Jake Hughes, not really his fault. It was just the team operationally made a mistake. Even a world championship winning squad like the former Mercedes Formula E team, which is now McLaren, of course, they can make mistakes like this sometimes. So it was, yeah, it's the sort of thing that just can happen sometimes when either they were just not on the ball or they mistimed it potentially. I don't know exactly what happened, but it was one of those two things. So the rule there is basically just to it's more of a probably not for safety, but more or for Parc Fermé. It's probably more of a kind of just so nobody rushes out without enough time to sort of make sure everything's okay on the car. We might say 95 seconds, 100 seconds, but 100 seconds is the rule. Everyone's got to stick to it, and McLaren fell foul of it on this occasion in the race. And this is probably the more interesting thing to pick up on is not that that's not interesting, of course, but there was this incident where, for Hughes specifically, which caused the safety car, where basically there was a lot of debris from a couple of incidents that sort of piled on top of one another. First, Mortara losing his front wing, then a couple of others losing various bits of usually their front wing, and Jake Dennis in particular lost his rear winglets. But I'm not sure, I haven't got any rear winglets, so I'm not sure why I pointed just there. I'm not sure I'm proving anything there. But essentially, Jake Hughes hit a bit of debris. It hit his wing mirror. I forget if it was the left or right wing mirror. And that wing mirror went back into the cockpit, got jammed against the steering wheel. So he was coming out of the Lumbini hairpin. That's what it's called. I just looked it up in between being asked this question. And the wheel locked all the way to the right. And so he was going straight into the wall, essentially. So it wasn't really Jake Hughes' fault at all. It was a very bizarre incident and a consequence, I believe, and Josh was me and him were talking about this during the race, and Nick Holmberg, I think, pointed out a few times too, that there were lots of opportunities where there was lots of debris. They probably should have done a full course yellow or a safety car earlier, and they didn't. And as a result, they had to get the full safety car out when Jake Hughes had that crash, which basically was nearly on the apex of what was effectively turn 3. And as for Rene Rast, he did essentially kind of what Sam Bird did, no, it was a bit more like Mortara, wasn't it? Where he was overtaking Roland, I believe, ran out of space and hit the back of Hughes. Roland also hit Dennis, sorry. The two Jakes got mixed up in my head because I was talking about Jake Hughes earlier in this question, in this answer, sorry. And this is a bit of a train wreck. But anyway, shall I start again? But anyway, so there was this crash in the hairpin, at the Lumbini hairpin, between Jake Dennis being hit by not just Rene Rast, who went over and destroyed the rear winglets, but Oliver Rowland, for good measure, had a go at them. And as a result, I think Oliver Rowland got taken by Da Costa not long after that as well. I got one of those in the cupboard somewhere as well, actually. So it's clear who went to editing school here.
Oh no, real people just do claps now.
There's an answer that I'm trying to build to here, but I keep getting interrupted for some reason. Interrupted by myself and also by Joshua. But anyway, so it was a mistake by Rene Rast. He went a bit too deep in, and Oliver Rowland pretty much did the same thing. It was just really unfortunate. Again, Jake Dennis was sort of an innocent victim, really, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Rene Rast did pretty much exactly what Sam Bird and Eduardo Mortara did before him, and easy mistake enough to make, and it damaged the car completely to the point that Rene Rast couldn't continue. So both McLarens out. Mysteriously, after I create the Nemo McLaren Twitter account, which seems to put a curse on the entire McLaren team because they just had operationally a bit of a messy weekend. And Jake Hughes, I think, in the question you said earlier, Joe, you were posing that it would sort of crash back down to earth for Jake Hughes. But I think Hughes was the only one who didn't really mess up in the McLaren team this weekend, this whole race day. So at Hyderabad, I feel like he was a bit unlucky, like some of the others. But also, Formula E is tough. As a rookie, you discover that sooner or later. And I think Jake Hughes, his qualifying performances have been really, really strong the whole season long in these first 4 races. But in the races, he struggled with energy management. He's had a much tougher time of it and sort of scraped a few decent points finishes. And I have a feeling we haven't really seen the best. So I think Jake Hughes will take it on the chin and recover well, I think, from this, because it's a bit of a school of hard knocks. But having the wing mirror fall into your steering wheel is definitely concerning, especially after what happened to Robin Freins earlier in the season, where he hit the back of Norman Nato, got caught out completely, and was touching the wheel when it jerked violently on him, and actually it caused a bit of bone to stick out. Robin Freins, of course, has spent the last month or so essentially recovering and is hoping to come back for South Africa. Kelvin van der Linde is sort of hoping that there can be a bit of morphine put into Robin Freins so that he sits out and Kelvin van der Linde gets to do his home race, I guess. But yeah, anyway, this is a very long, rambly answer, but I think a pretty bad day for McLaren, all things concerned. I think worse than Jaguar, because actually their pace wasn't quite as good as Jaguar, and both their drivers really just had these horrific accidents, whereas at least Sam Bird is the clear culprit in the Jaguar's bad day that they can pin the blame on if they wish to, but it seems the team spirit's pretty good in both sides, all things considered.
I'll pick up on the debris on the track that we had. Nick Homewood said several times there should have been a safety car to clean the track up. There was a lot of debris. We had a wing of Mortara lying on the racing line for about 3 laps, and there was yellow flags out, but the marshals are having the slippery surface obstacle flag out, not double yellows. That got cleared away eventually, but there was constant debris right on the racing line that could have caused a major accident. There wasn't a full course yellow. There wasn't a safety car. And I think Nick Homewood summed it up perfectly. He said that the race control and the race direction here today was absolutely shocking. It just completely failed because nothing was working. I think you also said as well, India hasn't really given us a good looking way to how to run a Formula E race. Practice 1, police letting vehicles onto the track, tuk-tuks going around. Practice 2 went okay, but the track was still very dirty. Qualifying, the stewards couldn't make their mind up on whether it was a penalty or not. The race, well, the no safety cars when there should have been, full course yellows. We haven't seen a full course yellow, I don't think, all season, and yet that's a procedure to get rid of things like that off the racing line without having to neutralise the race. So they need to remember their own systems. I think Scott Elkin needs to go on a bit of a refresher course as well, because if not, it's getting dangerous now, leaving those very large pieces of very heavy and sharp carbon fiber in racing line conditions. So a lot need to be learned here. But congratulations to Jean-Eric Verne, who apparently now drives for Mahindra, according to the announcers, when they said, and now for the winning constructor, Mahindra. But it's DS Penske. So it was just it was a bit of a shambles from a presentation point of view.
Yeah, it got even more chaotic because they said usually at the end of the podium ceremony, after the champagne is sprayed, there's a message that appears that says, "We'll see you at the next race in this case, Cape Town." It should have said Cape Town, but initially it said Diriyah for some inexplicable reason. Maybe instead of putting they saw SA and they put Saudi Arabia instead of South Africa. And I saw that and I said, Josh, you didn't tell me about this. Another race in Diriyah after the first 2. Right, I'm out of here. I'm not coming back for a while. But I was just kidding. Thankfully, they did correct it soon after that. It's not a surprise race added to the calendar back in Saudi Arabia. I mean, they probably got enough money to pay for one, knowing those guys.
Probably, yeah. It was a lot of them. It was a mess, though. I think race control need to go away, get themselves in an order.
Not the marshal's fault. I misjudged the marshal because it was the police's fault for FP1, and then the race they were waving the flags that Scott Elkins basically instructed them to. It felt like a race control either didn't have the full picture or there was some kind of miscommunication issues. So I don't think Scott Elkins is a bad race director, but I think maybe he was a little bit hesitant perhaps to disrupt the race with the safety car, and maybe that more action was needed a bit earlier, I think, and maybe they'll learn from this going forward. So.
I'd like to praise the Marshals actually because they got rid of Hughes's car incredibly quickly off that racing line. Fantastic work.
Yeah, the Marshals, of course, without them, we're not racing. I have to agree with you. All the debris I was seeing was like, shouldn't we have some way to take care of it? I do wonder. I know we don't get the full picture, but I know especially if there's like an area where there's a big crowd and the concern of it being tossed up and going into the crowd may have brought a safety car out. If those areas were along areas where it was just the marshals, maybe that could have been it. But I agree. Just seeing it, it's like, well, someone tries to make a move, there's a big chunk of fiber right there in the way. It's going to hurt somebody. So this weekend, the Formula E race, I guess we could say, as you've been all saying, it's sort of back to Formula E as we expected. That unusual, that physical. First time this year, nobody got to pick a winner right. And it's because of Formula E. So this happens again. Maybe we'll bring back that Wheel of Destiny. We know some folks want it. Some folks don't use it. We still have World Rally Championship going on right now. Autonic is leading Craig Breen as we speak. So potentially one person who's on here did pick Autonic. They might score a point. Rally Sweden will conclude tomorrow, but we will have the race recap on Wednesday's grid tonight. Matt White will be joining Joshua and Kobe. And of course, as you all saw, Casey Campbell reported on the Asian Le Mans series, which was part of the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Now it's time for our one shiny moment as we conclude our recap of the Formula E race. Joshua, starting with you, what is your one shining moment from the race weekend?
It's a hard one to pick this time out, and I didn't think it would be.
Probably not Hyderabad Police, I would
think-
go for.
Yeah, definitely not them for letting the tuk-tuks on the circuit. Literally, tuk-tuks going around the track, and that's why we had such a long delay. I did actually wonder why there was a tuk-tuk on the circuit at the side of the track, and now we know why at the start of practice one. It probably just got parked there. What I'm trying to. It's quite difficult to think this weekend.
Just in general, or because you've not slept?
Yeah. 1 hour 51 minutes of sleep probably isn't the best. I would go for Pascal Wehrlein, and not just because of how lucky he's been in closing up the field, but because he's turned a bad weekend into an extension of the championship by 18 points, and in such a long season, that is quite a nice gap to have. So I think Wehrlein has done incredibly well there. After he started 12th on the grid after 3-place grid penalty, the weekend was going to hell. And then he's got it up into 4th position. Very well done.
Yeah, I think there's two that stand out to me. I think one, I would have to say, it was great to see in a bit of a refreshing. It was great to see Mexico, see lots of fans. To skip Saudi Arabia, where I'm sure the grandstands were packed and not completely empty as they usually are in that part of the world.
They're empty.
Oh, okay, that's good. And then to go back to Hyderabad and see once again really, really big crowds, because of course it's been 10 years since there was world championship level sort of motorsport in India, since the F1 last Formula 1 race in at Burch International in New Delhi in 2013. So of course where Sebastian Vettel won the championship, the last of his 4 championships, of course, as we all remember. But it was great to see such. I think there was thousands and thousands of people that showed up and parted with their hard-earned money to get in and watch. And they all seemed really, really passionate, especially for Mahindra in particular. But also there were quite a few Jaguar or Tata fans, I guess, who own Jaguar. But that was really, really great to see all that sort of passion. The people who waited so long for a Formula E race in India, pretty much since the first season when Mahindra joined. They've been rumblings and, oh, can we make this happen? Can we make this happen? So it's great to see they finally pulled it off, even if there were organizationally, it wasn't exactly the cleanest maybe Formula E event that we've ever seen. But hopefully things go a lot smoother when we come back in future seasons. The other one I wanted to highlight was, which we've not really talked about a whole lot, was Sergio Sede Camara finishing 5th for Neo 333, their best result in 2 seasons, possibly more. I can't remember the last time a Neo 333 car got a top 5 finish, but I thought it was a very, very. The only time we really saw Sergio Sede Camara was when he was running about 10th early in the race, making a pretty good start, and then had a massive slide into the 1-2 chicane where he basically narrowly avoided the rear going into the wall. So he showed great car control, if nothing else. Really was able to survive the race. Made a great move at the very end. Managed his energy well to get past Oliver Rowland, I think, who was starting to struggle near the end of the race, and was able to get into what ended up being a top 5 position after Buemi's essentially penalty. So I thought Sergio Sede Camara, who's struggled for so many seasons in the pretty awful Dragon Penske, switches over to Neo 333, finally able to get a good performance after being kind of outshone by Dan Ticktum in the opening couple of rounds, in qualifying at the very least. And I thought it was great to see Sergio Sede Camara put in a genuinely really good performance and hold his head, keep his head, while others seem to lose theirs in the heat and humidity and sort of just dustiness of Hyderabad. So I think in terms of the drivers, Sede Camara it would be the recipient of my one shining moment.
And you took my one shining moment because I know he started way back, came up to 5th place, and I remember at qualifying they were talking about he's been outshone by Dan Ticktum. Dan Ticktum this, Dan Ticktum that. He silenced them today because now he's ahead of Dan.
Well, to be fair, Ticktum I think retired quite early on with a reliability issue, so it wasn't Ticktum didn't really get much chance to show what he could have done today.
I think that is their best finish since Berlin season 4, 2017.
4, yeah, because Turvey I think finished top 6,
5th.
top 5 in that race. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, 5th. Of course, their last win came in Moscow in season 1. I'm just looking up on the Motorsport
Which was
stats.
quite a while away. The man who won that race was commentating on this one, so
Yeah,
that shows you how
that's
much
true.
things have changed with Piquet Jr. now. I guess move it. He was sort of pushed on because Jaguar sacked him a few seasons ago, so not really by choice.
But yeah, my second, since my first shine moment was taken, has to
sorry,
go.
Joe.
It's all good. John-Eric Verne, he's been winless for quite a few seasons. I know, especially for a driver in a top series, if you go a while without winning, that's always where you can start doubting yourself. People start doubting you. Have you already passed your prime? You're a two-time champion, all that. John-Eric Verne, masterful job driving, keeping that car wide, making it hard to pass. We see his teammate, Stoffel Van Dorn. We know what the situation with this car. Stoffel Van Dorn trying to get up there, but John-Eric Verne put in a clinic essentially of why he is a two-time champion in Formula E, and he gets my one shining moment. And of course, you will also get my one shining moment if you invest in the Grid Network. Join David and investing along with Colin Deschelle, Mark, and Robin. Your monthly contribution helps us get to the track, stay on the air, pays the bills. You can also buy us a coffee, one-time contribution. You set the amount, and you can buy a coffee for a specific on-air personality here in the Grid Network, and they'll thank you on the air. Subscribe, like, comment on all our videos right here on YouTube. We have a busy week with Daytona week coming up for the Daytona 500, which all leads up to our pre-race show Sunday before the Daytona 500. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our programs. And of course, links to Joshua's channel as well as to the Formula E channel as well. Formula E Zone channel as well in our profile. And we thank everyone in the channel for participating in today's show. For Edward Hunter from Formula E Zone and Joshua Burch from Joshua Burch Motorsports, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time, and we'll see you Monday for Grid Encore. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.